The Caribbean Sea, 1715. Captain Blackwood's shadow fell over the trembling girl, caught red-handed in his ship's galley, his weathered face, scarred from countless battles, twisted into a scowl that had made grown men beg for mercy. She couldn't be more than 12, all bones and tattered clothes, clutching a loaf of bread to her chest like treasure. His crew watched, knowing theft aboard the Vengeance meant death. As he raised his hand, the girl didn't cower but looked straight into his eyes. "My sister hasn't eaten in 3 days, sir. I promised I wouldn't let her die like our parents." What was it about those words that reached into the darkest corners of Blackwood's soul? The sun dipped below the horizon, casting the captain's quarters in amber shadows. Blackwood sat alone, quill in hand, adding to his leather-bound logbook. Another merchant vessel surrendered without a fight today. My name alone now makes men tremble. He paused, watching ink absorb into parchment. 20 years at sea had weathered his face like the oak of his ship, deep lines mapping a journey from naval officer to the most feared pirate in the Caribbean. A knock interrupted his thoughts. "Enter," he commanded, voice like gravel. First Mate Morgan stepped inside, a tall man with a beard as wild as a storm. "The men are celebrating today's haul, Captain. Finest silk from the Orient. We'll fetch a handsome price in Tortuga." Blackwood merely nodded, dismissing Morgan with a wave. The door closed, leaving him alone again with his thoughts and the gentle rocking of the Vengeance. His fingers traced the scar running from temple to jaw, a reminder of his first battle as captain. That day, he'd executed 3 men to secure loyalty from a newly captured vessel. Now, he rarely needed such displays. His reputation sailed before him like a black flag. He walked to the window, observing his crew below. 43 men, each with a price on his head, each loyal to Blackwood or at least to the fear he instilled. They sang and drank, celebrating riches that would be squandered in port on rum and women. Simple pleasures for simple men. Blackwood was different. He hoarded not gold but power. Respect extracted through terror was still respect. His gaze fell upon the small figure huddled against the mainmast, the girl from the galley. She sat alone, untouched by the crew, who knew better than to approach the captains. What? Prisoner? Ward? He himself wasn't certain why he'd spared her. 20 lashes for stealing, the code stated clearly. The code he'd written himself. A memory surfaced, unwelcome, unbidden. A boy not much older than her, stomach hollow with hunger, stealing bread from a naval officer's table. The punishment had been swift and merciless. Blackwood turned away from the window, from the past. He unlocked a hidden compartment beneath the floorboards, removing a small wooden box. Inside, a weathered portrait of a woman with kind eyes stared back at him. Catherine. Her name remained unspoken for 15 years, yet her face haunted him still. "You would have helped the girl," he whispered to the portrait. "You always saw more in people than I could." The ship's bell rang 8 times. Midnight watch. Blackwood returned the portrait to its hiding place. Time to make rounds, to remind the crew who commanded the Vengeance. Fear required constant maintenance. Donning his long coat and wide-brimmed hat, he stepped onto the deck. Conversations died. Men straightened, eyes lowered, all except the girl's, which followed him with curious intensity. "Report," he barked at the night watchman. "All quiet, Captain. Fair winds to Tortuga. We'll make port by midday tomorrow." Blackwood nodded, continuing his walk around the deck. The girl remained by the mast, watching. Her defiance should have angered him. Instead, it stirred something else. Respect, perhaps. Or recognition. He approached her, towering above her small frame. "You should be sleeping." "Can't sleep on an empty stomach," she replied simply. Bold. Either very brave or very foolish. Without a word, he removed a biscuit from his pocket and offered it. After a hesitant moment, she took it. "What's your name, girl?" "Eliza, sir. Tomorrow we make port. You'll be put ashore with provisions." She looked up, eyes reflecting starlight and determination. My sister needs medicine. She's hiding in town. That's not my concern. Then why give me food? Why not throw me overboard? The question hung between them like a challenge. Around them, the crew pretended not to listen, but Blackwood knew better. Get some sleep, he said finally, turning away. We'll speak of your sister tomorrow. In his quarters once more, Blackwood opened his logbook again. The men whisper I'm growing soft, he wrote. Perhaps I am, or perhaps I'm remembering something I've long tried to forget. That before I was Captain Blackwood, I was simply Edward, a boy who once stole to survive. He closed the book, extinguished his lamp, and laid in darkness, listening to the familiar creaking of his ship, the only home he'd known for 2 decades, the only place where his word was law and his past remained buried. Until today, Eliza woke before dawn, curled against the mainmast where she'd spent the night. Her fingers instinctively reached for the torn portrait tucked safely inside her threadbare dress, her most precious possession. The faces of her parents smiled back at her, though the right side had been burned away during the fire that claimed their small home. Their faces were beginning to fade from her memory, but the portrait helped her remember. 3 months. That's how long it had been since the fever swept through their village on St. Martin. First their father succumbed, then their mother a week later. The authorities had come to take the orphans to separate workhouses. Eliza had grabbed Marie and run. Survival became her only purpose. At 12 years old, Eliza learned to steal, to hide, to lie, all to keep her 8-year-old sister alive. She carefully folded the portrait and tucked it away as sailors began stirring around the deck. None paid her much mind, though a few cast suspicious glances. The old cook, a man with skin like weathered leather and missing 3 fingers on his left hand, tossed her half a loaf. "Captain says you're to be fed," he grunted before hobbling away. Eliza wrapped most of the bread in a scrap of cloth, saving it for Marie. Her sister's face had grown so thin lately, her once bright eyes now sunken and dull. The medicine she needed was expensive, impossible for a child thief to obtain. That's why Eliza had taken her biggest risk yet, stowing away on the notorious Captain Blackwood's ship when it docked for supplies. The Vengeance was said to carry wealth beyond imagination. One small trinket might buy the medicine Marie needed. Instead, she'd been caught red-handed in the galley. She'd expected death. Everyone knew pirates showed no mercy, especially not the legendary Blackwood. Yet here she sat, alive and fed. "You there, girl," called a gruff voice. The first mate, Morgan, beckoned her. "Captain wants a word." Eliza followed him to the captain's quarters, heart pounding against her ribs. Yesterday's reprieve might have been temporary. Perhaps now her punishment would come. Captain Blackwood stood by his desk, examining a map. Without looking up, he spoke. "You mentioned a sister." "Yes, sir. Marie, she's hiding in a fisherman's abandoned hut near the docks." "Ill, you said?" Eliza nodded. "The fever that took our parents, she survived but never fully recovered. The doctor said she needs special medicine from the mainland. And your parents, dead, sir. 3 months now." Blackwood finally looked at her, eyes narrowing. "No relatives? No one to take you in? An uncle in England? We've never met him." The captain seemed to consider this information, his scarred face unreadable. "And you thought stealing from pirates was your best option?" "I thought rich men wouldn't miss a few coins," she admitted. "And Marie's getting worse each day." Something flickered across Blackwood's face, recognition perhaps. He turned to Morgan. "When we dock, escort her to her sister. Bring the ship's doctor." Morgan's eyebrows rose in surprise. "The doctor, Captain." "Did I stutter, Mr. Morgan?" "No, Captain." When Morgan left, Blackwood fixed Eliza with a piercing stare. "I'm not in the business of charity, girl. Consider this payment." "Payment for what?" "Information. Tell me about the naval presence in the harbor. How many ships? What flags? What talk have you heard of movements against pirates?" Eliza straightened. This she could do. Living on the streets, she'd become invisible, hearing conversations never meant for her ears. 2 Royal Navy frigates docked 3 days ago. The Intrepid and the Dauntless. Officers were boasting about a new strategy to trap pirates in the Windward Passage. She paused. They mentioned you specifically, sir. A Commander Walsh seems particularly interested in your capture. Blackwood's expression darkened at the name. Walsh, he muttered. Almost to himself. There's a reward, Eliza continued. £5,000 for information leading to your capture. A grim smile crossed Blackwood's face. My price has gone up. I'm flattered. The ship lurched slightly as it changed course, and Eliza stumbled. Blackwood caught her arm, steadying her. For a moment the fearsome pirate's grip was gentle. Tell me, Eliza, he said, releasing her. How does a child know so much about naval movements? She met his gaze. Hungry people learn to listen when others don't notice them, and no one notices orphans. As the Vengeance sailed toward port and toward Marie, Eliza wondered if she had made a deal with the devil himself. But for her sister, she would bargain with far worse than pirate. The port of St. Martin sprawled before them, a haphazard collection of weathered buildings and crowded docks. As the Vengeance dropped anchor in the deep harbor, Blackwood stood at the quarterdeck, watching his crew prepare to go ashore. The girl, Eliza, waited by the railing, anxious to return to her sister. Blackwood reached into his pocket, fingers closing around a Spanish doubloon, his mercy coin, as he privately thought of it. A relic from his first command. When choices were simpler, he'd taken to flipping it when faced with decisions that stirred unwelcome conscience. Captain, Morgan approached, lowering his voice. The men are talking about the girl. Let them talk, Blackwood replied coldly. It's not just talk. Greeley and Finch are questioning your judgment. Say sparing a thief violates the code. Blackwood's eyes narrowed. My code, Mr. Morgan, my ship. Begging your pardon, Captain, but precedent matters at sea. Show weakness once. Weakness. Blackwood turned to face his first mate fully. Was it weakness when I keel-hauled Jenkins for questioning my orders? Or when I marooned Cooper with nothing but a pistol and single shot? Morgan swallowed hard. No, Captain. Gather the crew, now. As Morgan hurried away, Blackwood turned the coin between his fingers. Heads or tails, mercy or the code. The faces of 40 men who watched his every decision for signs of softening. The crew assembled on the main deck, Eliza standing uncomfortably among them. Blackwood descended the stairs with deliberate slowness, each footfall landing with authority. He surveyed the faces before him, weathered, scarred, some loyal, others merely afraid. Mr. Greeley, Blackwood called. A burly man with a braided beard stepped forward, defiance barely concealed. Mr. Finch, a thin, rat-faced man, joined him, eyes darting nervously. I understand you have concerns about my decision regarding our young stowaway, Blackwood said, voice dangerously soft. Greeley straightened. The code says thieves get 20 lashes, Captain. No exceptions. The code, Blackwood repeated, pacing slowly. My code, written by my hand, enforced by my judgment. He stopped, addressing the entire crew. The day any man aboard this vessel believes he can interpret my code better than I can will be his last day with a tongue in his head. A heavy silence fell. Blackwood flipped his coin, catching it and slapping it against the back of his hand. He didn't look at the result. The girl lives because she has value. Information on naval movements worth more than the bread she stole. He fixed Greeley with a cold stare. Unless you believe 20 lashes would better serve our interests. Greeley dropped his gaze. No, Captain. Mr. Morgan will escort her to find her sister. Dr. Hayes will determine if the child can be saved. Blackwood's voice hardened. Anyone who questions my judgment again will face the consequences. Dismissed. As the crew dispersed, Blackwood approached Eliza, who had watched the entire exchange with wary eyes. You didn't look, she said quietly. What? The coin. You didn't check which side landed up. Blackwood studied her, too observant by half. Does it matter? She seemed to consider this. I think it would to you. He ignored her comment, instead pressing the coin into her palm. "For your sister's medicine. My men will help you today, but tomorrow you're on your own." Before she could respond, a commotion arose near the gangplank. Morgan was arguing with two naval officers attempting to board. "Inspection," one was saying. "Governor's orders, all vessels in harbor." Blackwood moved swiftly, positioning himself between Eliza and the officer's line of sight. "Mr. Morgan, escort our guest now. Doctor, accompany them." As Morgan, Hayes and Eliza slipped away down the opposite side of the ship, Blackwood approached the officers with the practiced charm he reserved for authorities. "Gentlemen," he called, "Captain Edward Smith at your service. What brings the king's finest to my humble trading vessel?" Later, as the naval officers departed, satisfied with his forged papers and generous customs fee, Blackwood watched from the railing as Morgan, Hayes and Eliza made their way through crowded streets toward the outskirts of town. He retrieved a second coin from his pocket, identical to the one he'd given the girl. The true mercy coin. He flipped it, caught it, and finally looked. Heads. Mercy. He closed his fist around it, troubled by the realization that he'd already made his decision before the coin had landed. The abandoned fisherman's hut stood at the edge of the beach, far from the bustling harbor. Its weathered planks offered little protection from the elements, gaps between boards letting in salt air and sea spray. Eliza pushed open the crooked door, Morgan and Dr. Hayes following close behind. "Marie," she called softly. "It's me. I've brought help." In the corner, a small figure stirred beneath a pile of ragged blankets. Marie's face appeared, gaunt and pale, her eyes too large for her thin face. When she saw the men behind her sister, she shrank back in fear. "It's all right," Eliza soothed, kneeling beside her. "They're here to help. This is a real doctor." Hayes approached cautiously, setting down his worn leather medical bag. He was older than most pirates, with silver-streaked hair and deep lines around kind eyes, a stark contrast to his rough companions. From the bag, he removed a small pouch of herbs, their pungent aroma filling the small space. "May I?" he asked Marie, voice gentler than Eliza expected from a pirate doctor. Marie nodded weakly. Hayes placed a weathered hand on her forehead, frowning at the heat radiating from her skin. He listened to her breathing, examined her throat, and checked the glands in her neck with practiced movements. "How long has she been this way?" he asked. "The fever comes and goes," Eliza explained. 3 months since our parents died from it. Marie survived, but never got fully well." Hayes opened his herb pouch, selecting various dried leaves and roots with careful consideration. "Lingering marsh fever, not uncommon in these islands, especially in the wet season." He began grinding herbs with a small mortar and pestle. "I've seen it before in the colonies." Morgan stood awkwardly by the door, clearly uncomfortable with the situation. "Captain said to help, then return to the ship. We've naval officers in port." "This child needs more than a few herbs," Hayes replied sharply. "She needs proper care, clean water, food." "That's not our concern," Morgan insisted. "We've done as ordered." Eliza looked between them, desperation rising. "Please," she said. "I can't lose her too." Hayes continued his work silently, mixing the ground herbs with water from his flask. "She needs cinchona bark. It's the only thing that will break the fever for good." He handed the mixture to Marie, who drank reluctantly, making a face at the bitter taste. "I have some on the ship, but not enough." A heavy silence fell. Morgan shifted his weight from one foot to another, looking increasingly anxious to leave. "Mr. Morgan," a deep voice spoke from the doorway. All heads turned to find Captain Blackwood filling the frame, his imposing figure silhouetted against the afternoon light. Morgan straightened immediately. "Captain, I was just about to report to the ship and prepare to make way." Blackwood interrupted, his eyes moving past his first mate to the small girl on the makeshift bed. "The naval presence is growing. Commander Walsh himself has been sighted." "Aye, Captain." Morgan hurried out, relief evident in his quick departure. Blackwood stepped inside, ducking beneath the low doorway. Marie's eyes widened at the sight of him, his scarred face and dark clothing making him appear more monster than man. "Your assessment, Doctor?" he asked, ignoring the child's frightened stare. "Marsh fever, Captain. Advanced but not beyond treatment. She needs cinchona bark, proper nourishment, clean conditions." Hayes closed his medical bag. "Left like this, she won't last another fortnight." Blackwood's expression remained unreadable. He reached into his coat and withdrew a small purse, placing it on a rickety table. "For lodging and food. There's an apothecary near the harbor that should have what you need." Hayes raised an eyebrow. "We sail with the evening tide, Captain." Blackwood was silent for a moment, his gaze moving from Marie to Eliza. Something unspoken passed between the pirate and the elder girl, a recognition perhaps, or understanding. "The Vengeance sails tonight," he confirmed. "You do not." Hayes blinked in surprise. "Sir, consider it shore leave, Doctor." 1 week. Blackwood turned to leave, then paused. "The naval authorities are searching for pirates. Keep to yourselves." After he left, Eliza stared at the purse on the table, then at the doctor, who seemed equally stunned by the captain's decision. "Why would he do that?" she whispered. Hayes shook his head slowly, removing more herbs from his pouch. "In 20 years sailing with Blackwood, I've never seen him show mercy twice." He began preparing another mixture. "Whatever you said to him, girl, it reached somewhere long buried." Marie coughed weakly, drawing their attention back to her immediate needs. "Will she live?" Eliza asked, voice small. Hayes nodded, determination in his weathered face. "Not only will she live, child, but we'll have her on her feet before the Vengeance returns." He handed Eliza the herb pouch. "Now let's find that apothecary. We've work to do." Commander James Walsh stood at his cabin window aboard the HMS Intrepid, watching the harbor through a brass spyglass. His uniform was immaculate, gold buttons gleaming in the late afternoon sun. On his desk lay a stack of bounty notices, the topmost bearing the crude likeness of a scarred face beneath the words "Wanted, Captain Blackwood of the Vengeance." The reward had been recently increased to 5,000. "You're out there, Edward," Walsh murmured, scanning the vessels anchored in the bay, his attention fixed on a sleek merchant ship, flying Dutch colors. Something about its lines seemed familiar. A knock interrupted his thoughts. "Enter," he called, not lowering his spyglass. Lieutenant Perkins stepped inside, saluting crisply. "Sir, our informant reports the Vengeance was spotted 3 days east of here, and yet I feel he's closer," Walsh replied, finally setting down the spyglass. He tapped the bounty notice. 15 years I've hunted him, Perkins. I know how he thinks. The governor has requested your presence at dinner tonight, sir. He's concerned about allocating so many resources to one pirate." Walsh's jaw tightened. One pirate who's claimed 12 Royal Navy vessels, who sank the Dauntless with all hands. He stopped himself, the memory still raw after all these years. "Of course, sir." Perkins knew better than to press. "There's one other matter. The harbor master reports a Dutch merchant captain came ashore earlier today with a doctor and a young girl. They were seen heading to the eastern shoreline." "A girl?" Walsh's interest sharpened. "Yes, sir. Apparently seeking medicine for a sick sister. The doctor purchased cinchona bark at the apothecary." "Cinchona, for marsh fever." Walsh paced slowly. Blackwood always did have a soft spot for Hayes. He picked up the bounty notice again, studying the face. "And Edward was once a man who couldn't abide seeing children suffer. Shall I dispatch men to investigate, sir?" Walsh considered, then shook his head. "No. Subtlety, Perkins. Have them followed discreetly. If it's Hayes, he'll lead us to Blackwood eventually." He smoothed his uniform. "I'll attend the governor's dinner. Double the harbor patrols tonight." After Perkins left, Walsh unlocked a drawer in his desk, removing a small wooden box. Inside lay a silver locket containing a miniature portrait of a young woman with gentle eyes and auburn hair. Beside it sat a yellowed letter, the paper worn thin at the folds. "I almost have him, Catherine," he whispered to the portrait. "Your brother will finally answer for his betrayal." On the Vengeance, now well away from St. Martin's Harbour, Blackwood stood at the helm, eyes on the horizon. The crew worked with practiced efficiency around him, though he noted the whispers, the glances. News of his decision to leave Hayes behind had spread quickly. "Course, Captain?" Morgan asked, approaching with careful deference. "Northwest. The Windward Passage." Morgan hesitated. "That's dangerous water, Captain. The Navy's been..." "I'm well aware of naval movements, Mr. Morgan." Blackwood's tone ended further discussion. "Tell Hawkins to ready the guns. We may need them." As Morgan left, Blackwood pulled a folded document from his coat. His own copy of the bounty notice, stolen from a harbour official that morning. Walsh's influence was evident in the wording, in the precise description of the Vengeance's capabilities. This was no ordinary hunt. This was personal. The setting sun cast long shadows across the deck, the dying light gleaming off the polished brass of the ship's bell. Blackwood felt a familiar sensation, the weight of being pursued, the calculated risk of each decision. For 15 years, he'd stayed ahead of Walsh through cunning and brutality. Yet, today, he'd made a choice based on neither. The memory of the girl's face, Eliza, troubled him. Something in her determination, her desperate protection of her sister, had stirred echoes he'd long suppressed. Leaving Hayes behind endangered them all. Walsh would hear of it, would recognize the doctor who had once served alongside both of them in the Royal Navy. It was sentiment, weakness, the very thing he'd punished in others. "The men are restless, Captain," said a voice behind him. Blackwood turned to find Collins, the quartermaster, a steady man who seldom spoke without good reason. "They'll settle once we've put distance between us and Walsh," Blackwood replied. "It's not just that," Collins lowered his voice. "Some question why we left port without taking prizes, without restocking properly." He paused. "Without the doctor?" Blackwood's eyes narrowed. "Names?" Collins shook his head. "Just murmurs, Captain. But growing. Then let them grow loud enough for me to hear. I'll address them personally." The threat in Blackwood's voice was unmistakable. As Collins returned to his duties, Blackwood gazed back toward St. Martin, now just a smudge on the darkening horizon. He'd given Hayes 1 week, 7 days to heal the child, or declare her beyond saving. 7 days before he would need to decide what came next. For the girls, for himself, for the fragile humanity he'd allowed to surface after years of careful burial. 6 days passed. The small hut, transformed under Dr. Hayes's supervision, floors scrubbed with vinegar, holes in the walls patched, fresh rushes laid for bedding. Marie's condition improved steadily, her fever breaking on the 3rd day after a regimen of Sansona bark and nourishing broths. On the 7th morning, Eliza woke to find Hayes sitting by the door, whittling a piece of driftwood with his pocket knife. Shavings fell in neat curls at his feet as a small wooden bird took shape in his hands. "The captain taught me," he said, noticing her watching. "Years ago, when we were both younger men, said it steadied the hands for surgery." Eliza sat beside him. "Were you always a pirate?" Hayes laughed softly. "No, child. I was a naval surgeon once. Respectable." His knife made another precise cut. "Life takes unexpected turns, like the captain leaving you here to help us." Hayes paused in his carving. Perhaps the most unexpected turn yet. The door creaked open. Marie stepped out, still thin but standing steady. Color returned to her cheeks. She carried a bucket, heading toward the well they shared with nearby cottages. "She's stronger," Eliza said, pride evident in her voice. Hayes nodded. "She'll live. But what happens now?" He set down the half-finished bird. "The Vengeance returns today. I must rejoin my ship." The unspoken question hung between them. What would become of the sisters? Their answer came at dusk. A longboat appeared offshore, 4 men rowing toward the beach. At their head sat Captain Blackwood, his dark figure, unmistakable even in the fading light. Hayes gathered his medical bag. "Whatever happens," he told Eliza quietly, "the captain keeps his word. Remember that." The girls watched from the doorway as Blackwood approached alone, his men waiting with the boat. The week at sea seemed to have hardened him further, his expression more severe than Eliza remembered. "Your report, doctor," he demanded without preamble. "The younger girl will recover fully," Hayes replied. "Your generosity saved her life, Captain." Blackwood's eyes moved to Marie, who shrank behind her sister. "Good. Gather your things. We sail with the tide." Hayes hesitated. "And the girls, Captain?" "That's not your concern." Blackwood's tone was final. Hayes bowed slightly, giving Eliza's shoulder a gentle squeeze before heading toward the waiting boat. Left alone with the sisters, Blackwood seemed suddenly uncomfortable. His imposing presence diminished somehow. From his pocket he withdrew a small pouch. "Enough for 2 months' lodging and food," he said, placing it on the table. "After that, you're on your own." Eliza stared at the pouch, then back at him. "Why are you helping us?" The question seemed to catch him off guard. "I've paid my debt. The information you provided about Wash proved accurate." "Is he still hunting you?" A shadow crossed Blackwood's face. "Wash will never stop hunting me." Marie stepped forward, her small voice surprising them both. "Are you a bad man?" "The fishermen say pirates are bad men." Blackwood regarded her with an unreadable expression. After a long moment, he reached into his coat and produced the wooden bird Hayes had been carving, now finished with delicate details in the wings and eyes. "Here," he said, offering it to Marie. "Hayes wanted you to have this." As Marie took the carving, examining it with wonder, Blackwood turned to leave. "Wait," Eliza called. "The naval patrols have increased. There are soldiers everywhere, asking questions. They came here yesterday, looking for a pirate doctor and 2 girls. Blackwood stopped. "What did you tell them?" "That we hadn't seen any pirates. That our uncle was treating us before returning to his merchant ship." Eliza met his gaze steadily. "I know how to lie, Captain, but they'll be back." He studied her for a long moment. "What are you suggesting?" "Take us with you." The words tumbled out before she could reconsider. "Just until we reach another island. Somewhere without so many soldiers. My ship is no place for children." "Neither is a prison," Eliza countered. "Or whatever happens to girls with no family and no protection." Something changed in Blackwood's expression. A flicker of recognition, perhaps memory. He looked out toward his waiting men, then back at the sisters. "Pack only what you need, nothing more." His voice was gruff, but lacked its usual edge. "And understand this on my ship. You follow orders without question. There will be no special treatment." As he strode back toward the boat, Eliza quickly gathered their few belongings. Marie clutched the wooden bird, her eyes wide. "Can we trust him?" she whispered. Eliza watched Blackwood's retreating figure, remembering Hayes's words. "The captain keeps his word." "I think we can," she replied. "At least more than we can trust what waits for us here." As the sun disappeared beneath the horizon, 2 orphan girls followed the feared pirate captain toward a ship named Vengeance and an uncertain future. The Vengeance cut through choppy waters, sails full in the morning breeze. 2 weeks had passed since the girls boarded, and their presence had become a source of growing tension. Eliza stood near the bow, watching dolphins race alongside the ship while trying to ignore the stares from nearby crewmen. Below deck, in the captain's quarters, Blackwood faced his senior officers. Morgan, Collins, and Hawkins, first mate, quartermaster, and master gunner, stood before his desk, where the ship's articles lay open, the code that governed their existence. "This arrangement can't continue, Captain." Morgan spoke first, gesturing at the document. "The men are talking. Children aboard is bad luck. Worse, it's against the code." Blackwood's finger traced Article 7, "No women or children to be brought aboard as passengers or crew, upon pain of punishment. The code is a guideline, Blackwood replied coolly. To be interpreted as circumstances dictate. Collins stepped forward. With respect, Captain, you yourself have enforced this article strictly in the past. Remember the merchant captain who begged us to spare his wife and daughter? A heavy silence followed. Blackwood remembered well the man's pleas, the subsequent execution all by his command. This is different, he said finally. How? Morgan demanded, then caught himself. Forgive me, Captain, but the men see inconsistency. First Hayes stays behind to treat them, now they're aboard. The crew fear you've grown. Careful, Mr. Morgan. Blackwood's voice dropped dangerously low. Distracted, Morgan finished cautiously. Hawkins, silent until now, cleared his throat. There's talk of the Portuguese treasure fleet sailing next month. Rich pickings, but they'll have naval escorts. Your point? Blackwood asked. We need the men focused, united, confident in your leadership. Hawkins glanced at his companions. Greeley and Finch have been particularly vocal. Others listened to them. Blackwood closed the articles with deliberate slowness. I see, and what would restore their confidence? The three officers exchanged looks. Morgan spoke, return to our usual hunting grounds, a rich prize, and put the children ashore at the next port. Blackwood stood, causing his officers to straighten instinctively. Gather the crew on deck. 1 hour. As they filed out, Morgan hesitated. Captain, no one questions your authority, but even you must answer to the code sometimes. After they left, Blackwood unlocked a cabinet behind his desk, removing a bottle of amber liquid. He rarely drank, knowing how alcohol loosened control, but today he poured a generous measure. A light knock interrupted him. Enter, he called, expecting Hayes with his daily report on the girls. Instead, Eliza slipped in, closing the door behind her. Your men don't want us here, she said without preamble. Blackwood raised an eyebrow. Eavesdropping is a dangerous habit, girl. Surviving requires information. She approached his desk fearlessly. We'll leave at the next port if that's what you need to maintain control. Her directness caught him off guard. Most grown men wouldn't dare speak to him so plainly. You understand command well for a child, he observed. I've kept my sister alive for months. That requires command too. Blackwood studied her, seeing something familiar in her determined eyes. And if I put you ashore, what then? We'll manage. We always have. Her voice held no self-pity, only resolve. He gestured to a chair. Hesitantly, she sat. Why did you become a pirate? She asked. The question was unexpected. Blackwood considered ignoring it, but instead found himself answering. I was a naval officer, like Walsh. The name tasted bitter. I had a career, respect, a future. What changed? Everything. He drained his glass. The Navy demanded obedience without question, even to orders that he stopped himself. The code may seem harsh, but at least it's honest. Men know what they sign up for. Eliza nodded toward the ship's articles on his desk. Did they sign up to follow the code or to follow you? Before he could answer, the ship's bell rang, signaling all hands on deck. Blackwood rose, donning his coat. Your men are waiting, Eliza said, standing. They're pirates, not saints. Remember that. He moved toward the door, then paused. Stay here with your sister during the assembly. On deck, the entire crew had gathered, muttering among themselves. Silence fell as Blackwood emerged. He surveyed them slowly, noting the division in their ranks. Those loyal, those wavering, those already turned against. I understand there are concerns about my recent decisions, he began, voice carrying across the ship. About the code. He drew his pistol, causing several men to tense. With deliberate movements, he placed it on a barrel before him. Any man who believes I've broken faith with this crew may step forward now. For several heartbeats, no one moved. Then Greeley pushed his way to the front, Finch close behind. The children, Captain, Greeley said. The code is clear. Blackwood nodded. So it is. And what would you have me do? Put them ashore, Finch replied. Return to hunting prizes worthy of the vengeance. I see. Blackwood's voice remained calm. And after that, will you question my next decision as well? Perhaps you believe you should be captain. Greeley blanched. No, captain. We just— Miss Hawkins, Blackwood interrupted. On the horizon. What do you see? Hawkins shielded his eyes against the sun. Merchant vessel, captain. Dutch East India Company. By the flag. A ripple of excitement moved through the crew. Blackwood's gaze remained on Greeley and Finch. It seems fortune provides an opportunity to demonstrate my commitment to this ship. He turned to Morgan. Battle stations. The confrontation forgotten for the moment, the crew scrambled to their positions. Blackwood's deft handling of the situation wasn't lost on Eliza, who had disobeyed orders and watched from the shadows of the companionway. 3 hours later, the merchant ship was secured alongside the Vengeance, its valuable cargo of spices, silk, and silver being transferred by the jubilant crew. The captain and officers had surrendered without a fight once they recognized the black flag of the notorious Captain Blackwood. Eliza remained hidden in Blackwood's quarters with Marie, as ordered during combat operations. Marie clutched her wooden bird nervously while Eliza explored the room, curiosity overcoming caution. In the 2 weeks aboard, she'd never been left alone here. Blackwood's quarters reflected his character, austere but with surprising touches of refinement. Books lined one shelf, maps another. Everything had its place, a military precision to the arrangement. A loose floorboard caught her attention. Glancing at Marie, was distracted by watching dolphins through the stern windows. Eliza carefully pried it up. Beneath lay a small compartment containing a wooden box. She shouldn't look. She knew better. Yet her fingers moved of their own accord, opening the simple latch. Inside lay several objects. The portrait of a woman Eliza had glimpsed before, letters tied with faded ribbon, and something that made her breath catch, a naval officer's insignia, tarnished with age, but unmistakable. Eliza, Marie whispered urgently. Someone's coming. Hastily, Eliza replaced the box and floorboard, scrambling away just as the door opened. Hayes entered, carrying a tray of food. Captain's orders, he explained, setting it down. You're to stay here until the prize is secured. Did they resist? Eliza asked, hoping her guilty flush wasn't obvious. Surrendered clean. The captain has a certain reputation. Hayes checked Marie's pulse with practiced ease. You look well, little one. The sea air agrees with you. After Hayes left, the sisters ate in silence. Outside, they could hear the crew celebrating their prize. Eventually exhausted by excitement, Marie fell asleep on Blackwood's bunk. Hours passed before the captain returned, smelling of gunpowder and sea air. He paused upon seeing Marie asleep in his bed, an unexpected softness crossing his features before he noticed Eliza watching. The merchant captain provided information about naval movements, he said, removing his coat. We'll make for Nassau. You'll be safer there. Eliza nodded, gathering courage. I saw your naval insignia. Blackwood froze, eyes darting to the floorboard, then back to her. Anger flashed across his face. You went through my things. It wasn't a question. Eliza stood her ground. I was curious. Curiosity is how people get killed on a pirate ship. His voice was deadly quiet. You were a lieutenant, she pressed. Royal Navy. Why did you leave? For a moment she thought he might strike her. Instead, he sank into his chair, suddenly looking older. Leave? I didn't leave, girl. I was betrayed. He stared at the far wall. By the very institution I served faithfully for 8 years. Commander Walsh, Eliza guessed. A bitter smile twisted his scarred face. James Walsh. Once my friend, later my superior officer, and brother to Catherine. His gaze drifted to the hidden compartment. My wife. The revelation hung in the air between them. What happened? Eliza asked softly. Blackwood was silent so long she thought he wouldn't answer. When he spoke, his voice was distant, as if the words came from somewhere long buried. We were stationed in Jamaica. I discovered officials taking bribes to allow slave ships through the blockade, ships that should have been seized under British law. His hands clenched. I reported it through proper channels, to Walsh. He didn't help. He was part of it. Blackwood's laugh held no humor. When I threatened to report higher, they arranged an accident. A fire aboard my ship. 26 men died. And Catherine, pain flashed across his face. She was bringing me documents, proof of the corruption. They knew the same night as the fire, there was a robbery at our home. His voice broke slightly. I found her body when I returned. Walsh claimed pirates were responsible. Understanding dawned on Eliza. So you became what they accused you of being. Ironic, isn't it? I took my ship, renamed her Vengeance, and committed myself to becoming everything they feared. He looked at her directly. And I've spent 15 years hunting those responsible, one by one. Is that why Walsh hunts you? Guilt? Walsh hunts me because I know the truth, and because I survived when I should have died. Blackwood stood abruptly. Enough questions. You shouldn't be here at all. But something had changed. A door once closed had been cracked open. You lost family too, Eliza said quietly, looking at her sleeping sister. That's why you helped us. Blackwood didn't answer, but his silence was confirmation enough. He moved to the door. The crew will be occupied with the prize through morning. Stay here tonight. Tomorrow we'll decide what comes next. After he left, Eliza lay beside Marie, mind racing with all she'd learned. The feared pirate captain had once been a man of principle, a man who lost everything for standing against corruption, a man not so different from herself, protecting what little family remained, whatever the cost. 3 days after taking the Dutch merchant vessel, the Vengeance sailed through increasingly treacherous waters. The mood aboard had improved, following the successful prize, the crew's pockets heavier with their shares. Even Greeley and Finch had quieted their descent, at least temporarily. On the quarterdeck, Blackwood and Morgan stood over a weather-beaten map, spread across a makeshift table, weighing its corners against the strengthening wind. Walsh has frigates patrolling here, and here, Blackwood indicated, marking positions with small stones. According to our Dutch friends, he's established a blockade around Nassau. Morgan frowned. Then we can't make harbor there as planned. No, we'll need to find alternative shelter. Blackwood studied the intricate markings on the map, many added in his own hand over years of navigation. Notations of dangerous shoals, safe harbors, settlements friendly to pirates, and those to be avoided. The storm season approaches, Morgan observed, eyeing the darkening horizon. Without safe harbor, Blackwood nodded grimly. We need to decide soon. Captain, the lookout's voice carried from the crow's nest. Sail on the horizon. Royal Navy colors. Blackwood snatched his spyglass, training it toward where the lookout pointed. The distinctive shape of a British frigate emerged against the sky, still distant but clearly on an intercept course. Battle stations, he ordered. Helmsman, come about to heading 135. As the crew leapt into action, Eliza appeared on deck, drawn by the commotion. In the 2 weeks since their conversation about his past, Blackwood had kept his distance from the girls, though he'd allowed them more freedom aboard ship. Marie had even become something of a mascot among certain crewmen, her innocent questions and wonder at sea life, providing unexpected amusement. Back to my quarters, Blackwood told Eliza sharply, spotting her. Naval vessel approaching. Instead of complying, she joined him at the railing, peering toward the distant ship. Is it Walsh? Can't be certain yet, but he's persistent. Blackwood's jaw tightened. Go below now. There's another one, Eliza said suddenly, pointing to a different section of horizon. See, just there, where the clouds meet the water. Blackwood swung his spyglass in the direction she indicated. Sure enough, the faintest silhouette of a second ship appeared, approaching from the southwest, a direction they hadn't been watching. Damn, he muttered. Good eyes, girl. They're trying to trap us between them, she observed. Blackwood shot her a look that was part irritation, part reluctant appreciation. "Mr. Morgan, change course to heading 260. All canvas." As the helmsman spun the wheel, Blackwood made rapid calculations. Their position, the wind, the speed of naval frigates versus the swifter, but smaller, Vengeance. "We can outrun them," Morgan asserted, joining them. "Perhaps," Blackwood replied. "But these are coordinated movements." Walsh is tightening his net. The ship heeled as it changed course, sails straining in the freshening breeze. The sky continued darkening, not just with approaching evening, but with storm clouds gathering on the western horizon. Weather's turning, Hawkins called, approaching with concern etched on his weathered face. Barometers dropping fast. Blackwood turned back to his map. "We need shelter, somewhere the naval ships won't follow." "The Devil's Teeth," Morgan suggested reluctantly, referring to a notorious reef system. "We know the passages. Navy ships draw too deep to follow." "Too dangerous in a rising storm," Blackwood countered. Eliza, still hovering nearby despite orders to leave, studied the map. "What about here?" She pointed to a small island Blackwood had marked with a red X. "That's no refuge," Morgan scoffed. "It's marked as forbidden." "Precisely why the Navy wouldn't follow," she reasoned. "What is it?" Blackwood exchanged glances with Morgan. "Abandoned slave quarantine station. Disease wiped out everyone there 15 years ago. Navy ships avoid it from superstition as much as health concerns. Could we shelter there?" "The harbor is sound," Blackwood admitted, "but many consider it cursed." A distant rumble of thunder punctuated his words. The crew glanced nervously toward the approaching storm front, now visible as a dark wall across the western sky. "Better cursed than caught," Eliza observed quietly. Blackwood found himself fighting a smile despite the gravity of their situation. "Mr. Morgan, new heading. We make for Quarantine Island." As orders were relayed and the ship changed course again, Blackwood rolled up his map, securing it inside his coat. "Now will you go below?" "Who can help?" Eliza insisted. "I spot things others miss." Before Blackwood could argue, a crack of nearby lightning illuminated the determined set of her jaw. In that flash he saw again the echo of himself at her age, stubborn, observant, unwilling to be sidelined. "Fine," he relented, "but you stay by Hayes, and when I give an order, you follow it instantly." "Understood?" She nodded solemnly. "The Navy ships are gaining, Captain," called the lookout, "and there's a third vessel now approaching from the north." They were waiting for us. Morgan realized this was a trap all along. Blackwood's face hardened. "Then we spring it on our terms. Full sail, even the royals. We'll outrun them to the island or founder in the attempt." As the Vengeance surged forward, racing against pursuing ships and the approaching storm, Blackwood felt a familiar calm settle over him, the clarity that came with command in crisis. Yet something was different. For the first time in 15 years, he had more to protect than just his ship and crew. Quarantine Island emerged from the storm like a specter, steep cliffs rising from churning seas, sparse vegetation clinging to rocky slopes. As the Vengeance approached, rain lashed the decks while waves crashed against the hull. The pursuing naval vessels had disappeared in the tempest, at least temporarily. "There," Blackwood shouted above the wind, pointing toward a narrow opening in the cliffs. The harbor entrance. Navigating the treacherous passage required every ounce of seamanship the crew possessed. Jagged rocks lurked beneath the water on either side, ready to tear open the hull at the slightest miscalculation. Blackwood himself took the wheel, eyes narrowed against the stinging rain. "Reef the mainsail," he ordered, as they slipped between towering stone walls. "Prepare to drop anchor." The passage suddenly widened, revealing a sheltered natural harbor. Though the storm still raged overhead, the waters here were relatively calm, protected by encircling cliffs. Along the shoreline stood dilapidated wooden structures, the abandoned quarantine station. "Secure all hatches and prepare storm anchors," Blackwood commanded once they reached the center of the harbor. No one goes ashore until I give the order. As the crew carried out his instructions, Eliza stood watching the island from beneath the shelter of the quarterdeck. Even through the rain, the eerie emptiness of the settlement was apparent. Decaying buildings with empty doorways like hollow eye sockets, a half-collapsed pier stretching into the water, a stone watchtower looming above. "Why was this place abandoned?" she asked. As Blackwood approached, "Yellow fever," he replied grimly. "It was used to quarantine slaves showing symptoms before they reached market. 15 years ago, an outbreak killed everyone. Doctors, guards, prisoners, over 200 souls lost. And now no one comes here. Pirates, occasionally when desperate." His gaze moved to a strange stone marker near the waterline. "Most avoid it. Superstition runs deep among sailors." As if to emphasize his point, one of the deckhands nearby made a warding gesture. "The cursed need permission to harbor here," he muttered. "Old Tobias believes the spirits of the dead require an offering," Morgan explained, joining them. Many of the men share his concern. Blackwood reached into his pocket, producing a weathered wooden token carved with unfamiliar symbols. "Fortunately, I've visited before." He moved to the bow, waiting for a lull in the rainfall. When it came, he cast the token into the water with a respectful nod toward the island. The crew watched anxiously as the token disappeared beneath the dark surface. "The tribute is paid," Blackwood announced. "We shelter here until the storm passes and Walsh's ships move on." A palpable relief spread through the crew, though many still cast uneasy glances toward shore. "What was that?" Eliza asked when he returned. "Insurance," he replied simply. "If it eases the men's fears, it's worth a wooden trinket." As evening fell, the storm showed no signs of abating. Lighting illuminated the abandoned settlement in brief, ghostly flashes. Most of the crew remained below decks, finding comfort in rum and cards, though the usual boisterous atmosphere was subdued. In Blackwood's quarters, Marie pressed her face against the window, watching raindrops streak the glass. "Are there really ghosts on the island?" she asked, her voice small. "There are no such things as ghosts," Eliza assured her, though she cast an uncertain glance toward Blackwood, who stood examining charts at his desk. "Perhaps not ghosts," he said without looking up, "but memory lingers in such places. The suffering that occurred here won't be easily forgotten." A knock interrupted them. Hayes entered, bringing a steaming pot of fish stew and hard bread. "The men are restless," he reported quietly to Blackwood. "Being here unsettles them. Some speak of moving on, storm or no storm." "The Navy ships?" "Still out there, according to Hawkins. 3 frigates, waiting beyond the passage." "They know we're trapped." Blackwood's expression hardened. "Then we wait them out. They can't maintain station forever." "There's more," Hayes continued hesitantly. "Rumors spreading about why Walsh hunts you so relentlessly. The men wonder what you did to earn such persistent enmity." "I survived," Blackwood replied coldly. After Hayes left, an uncomfortable silence filled the cabin. Marie had fallen asleep on Blackwood's bunk, clutching her wooden burr. Eliza remained by the window, watching lightning illuminate the abandoned settlement. "Is it true what the crew says?" she finally asked. "That no one leaves this island once the dead have claimed them?" Blackwood joined her at the window. "Many stories surround this place, most exaggerated, but not all." He studied her face, noting the genuine concern there. "No, not all." He pointed toward the crumbling watchtower. "That tower was built to prevent escape, not to watch for approaching ships. The guards were as afraid of disease as they were of rebellion. And when the fever came, those who tried to flee were shot. When the guards themselves fell ill, they barricaded themselves in the tower, refusing to help the dying below." His voice grew distant. "In the end, it made no difference. Death claimed them all equally." Eliza absorbed this grim history. "Yet you've been here before and survived." A ghost of a smile crossed his face. Perhaps the dead know I've suffered enough of my own. A particularly violent lightning strike illuminated something Eliza hadn't noticed before. A small cemetery on the hillside marked by crude crosses. "Tomorrow," Blackwood said, following her gaze, "we must go ashore for fresh water. The rain has filled the cistern." He turned to face her directly. "But understand this. No one explores alone. No one enters the buildings, and everyone returns to the ship by nightfall." "You believe the stories then?" she observed. "I believe in taking precautions," he corrected, "especially when sheltering in a graveyard." Dawn broke over Quarantine Island, revealing skies cleared of storm clouds. The Vengeance sat placidly in the sheltered harbor, surrounded by mist rising from the water's surface. Blackwood organized shore parties to collect fresh water and assess their situation. "The men draw lots for shore duty," Morgan noted with concern. "None volunteer. Superstitious fools," Blackwood muttered, though without real conviction. "I'll lead the first party myself." As Blackwood prepared to depart, Eliza approached. "We want to come too." "Absolutely not. We've been cooped up for days. Marie needs to stretch her legs." She lowered her voice. "And your men are more likely to keep their fears in check with her present. Few believe ghosts would harm a child." Blackwood considered this unexpected wisdom. Indeed, Marie's presence had already proven strangely calming to several of the most hardened crew members. Perhaps there was logic in Eliza's request. "Stay close to me or Hayes at all times," he conceded. The landing party rowed ashore. Blackwood, Hayes, the sisters, and 4 crewmen, including the superstitious Tobias, whose knowledge of island legends might prove useful. As their boots crunched on the pebbly shore, Tobias muttered protective charms under his breath. "The cisterns are this way," Blackwood directed, leading them up a worn path toward the abandoned buildings. The quarantine station was even more forlorn up close. Weathered wood bleached gray by sun and salt, windows like vacant eyes, doors hanging from rusted hinges. Silence hung heavy, broken only by the occasional cry of seabirds circling overhead. While the men filled water barrels at the stone cisterns, Blackwood kept watch from higher ground. 3 naval frigates remained visible beyond the island's cliffs, maintaining their blockade of the narrow entrance passage. "They're patient," Hayes observed, joining him. "Walsh knows I have few options. He can afford patience." Hayes hesitated before speaking again. "The men talk of the girl's quick eye spotting the second ship when others missed it. Some say it's fortunate she was aboard. And others wonder if our misfortune began with taking on passengers." Blackwood watched as Marie cautiously approached a colorful butterfly, resting on a withered shrub, her small face alight with wonder. Nearby, Eliza kept vigilant watch over her sister while helping fill water containers. "Fortune or misfortune, they're here now," Blackwood replied. Upon returning to the Vengeance, they found the mood increasingly tense. Groups of sailors, huddled in conversation, falling silent when Blackwood passed. Greeley and Finch had been particularly active in his absence, moving among the crew with hushed urgency. That evening, Collins, the quartermaster, sought Blackwood in his cabin. "Captain, there's talk below decks I thought you should know about." He shifted uncomfortably. "Some believe we were led into a trap, that Walsh knew exactly where we'd seek shelter." Blackwood set down his quill. "Go on." "They're saying someone aboard must have signaled our position, that we have a traitor in our midst." "And who do they suspect?" Collins' gaze flickered toward Marie, asleep in the small cot Blackwood had ordered constructed in the corner of his cabin. "Some point to the newcomers. He's edited. Others suggest your judgment has been compromised by their presence." Before Blackwood could respond, frantic footsteps approached. Morgan burst in without knocking. "Captain, you need to see this." Blackwood followed him to the main deck, where a sailor held something wrapped in cloth. The crew gathered around, faces grim in the lantern light. "Found it hidden beneath a water barrel," the sailor explained, unwrapping the bundle to reveal a small metal object that caught the light with a dull gleam. "A coin, but not any ordinary coin," It bore the seal of the Royal Navy. "Blood money," Tobias hissed. "Traitor's coin." Murmurs rippled through the crew. Blackwood took the coin, examining it closely. It was indeed naval currency, used to pay informants. "Where exactly was this found?" he demanded. "Starboard side, near the galley," came the reply. "Right where the girls' sleeping quarters were before you moved them to your cabin." All eyes turned to Eliza, who had emerged from below decks at the commotion. "You think I betrayed you?" she asked, her voice steady despite the dangerous tension surrounding her. "If I worked for the Navy, why would I have spotted the second ship? Why warn you at all?" "To gain our trust," Finch called out. "To make your betrayal all the more effective." "The naval ships were waiting for us," Greeley added. "They knew exactly where we'd go." Blackwood raised a hand for silence. "These are serious accusations requiring proof." "The proof is there in your hand," Greeley insisted. "Navy coin, hidden among her things." "I've never seen that before," Eliza protested. "Someone's trying to frame us." "Enough," Blackwood commanded. "I'll investigate this matter personally. Until then, no accusations will be made." He fixed Greeley with a hard stare. "Is that understood?" The standoff stretched, neither man willing to back down. Finally, Greeley nodded curtly, but the challenge in his eyes remained. Back in his cabin, Blackwood examined the coin more carefully. "I didn't betray you," Eliza said quietly from the doorway. "I know." His response surprised them both. "How can you be sure?" Blackwood held up the coin. "This is from the Guinea Coast Station. Walsh hasn't served there in 20 years. He set it down on his desk. Whoever planted this doesn't know naval currency well enough to choose correctly." Relief flooded Eliza's face. "Then you believe me?" "The question isn't whether you betrayed us," Blackwood replied grimly. "It's who did, and why they want you to take the blame." 3 days passed with Walsh's ships maintaining their blockade. Supplies dwindled, and tensions aboard the Vengeance escalated. Blackwood kept the sisters confined to his quarters for their safety, while he searched for the true traitor. On the morning of the 4th day, Hayes sought Blackwood on the quarterdeck, his expression grave. "Captain, it's Marie. Her fever has returned." Blackwood followed him below, finding Eliza pressing a damp cloth to her sister's forehead. Marie's face was flushed, her breathing labored. "I thought she was cured," Blackwood said, concern evident despite his effort to mask it. "Marsh fever can lie dormant," Hayes explained, checking Marie's pulse. "Stress, poor nutrition, or exposure can trigger a relapse." He lowered his voice. "She needs stronger medicine than I have aboard." Without proper treatment, he didn't need to finish. The implication was clear. What medicine, Blackwood demanded. Fresh cinchona bark would be best, processed into a tincture with proper equipment. Hayes hesitated. The naval surgeon aboard Walsh's flagship would have it. Blackwood's jaw tightened. "You're suggesting I surrender to save the girl?" "I'm stating medical facts, Captain. What you do with them is your decision." After Hayes left, Blackwood stood watching Marie's fitful sleep, while Eliza maintained her vigil. "You should rest," he told her. She shook her head. "I can't." He recognized the fear in her eyes, the same fear he'd seen in his own reflection after finding Catherine's body. The terror of losing the last person who mattered. "I won't let her die," he said, the words escaping before he could consider them. Eliza looked up, hope and doubt warring in her expression. "How can you prevent it?" Blackwood moved to his desk, unlocking a drawer to retrieve rolled parchment. "We need to reach Portsville on the main island. 3 hours sail from here, but the blockade can be run, with sufficient distraction and the right tide." He spread the document detailed harbor charts of Quarantine Island and surrounding waters. "There's a smaller passage on the western side, treacherous, but navigable at high tide for a ship that draws shallow. The Vengeance, too large." Blackwood traced the route with his finger, but the longboat could make it, with a small crew. Understanding dawned on Eliza's face. "You're planning to go yourself. Portsville is under British control. Anyone recognized from the crew would be arrested immediately." His eyes met hers. I, however, still have certain resources from my previous life. From another drawer, he withdrew a packet wrapped in oilcloth. Inside lay documents bearing official seals and signatures, forged with remarkable skill. Edward Smith, merchant captain, he explained. An identity I've maintained for emergency. With these papers, I can enter Portsville, obtain the medicine, and return before Walsh realizes I've slipped his net. It's too dangerous, Eliza protested. If you're recognized, the risk is necessary. He refolded the papers. I'll take Hayes and 2 trusted men. We leave at midnight when the tide turns. I'm coming too, Eliza stated firmly. Absolutely not. A merchant captain traveling with his daughter raises fewer suspicions than one alone, she reasoned. And I can help watch for danger. You know I see things others miss. And Maria Collins can watch over her. She trusts him. Determination hardened her features. I won't sit here wondering if you'll return. Not when Marie's life depends on it. Blackwood recognized the same stubborn resolve he relied on in himself. Arguing would only waste precious time. Very well, he conceded. But you follow my orders without question. One misstep could cost all our lives. At midnight, under a moonless sky, the longboat slipped away from the Vengeance with 5 occupants. Blackwood, Hayes, Eliza, and 2 loyal crewmen. They rowed in silence along the island's shoreline until reaching the hidden western passage. Narrow, Hayes whispered, eyeing the jagged rocks visible on either side. Keep to the center channel, Blackwood directed. The tide gives us barely a foot of clearance. The crossing was treacherous. Twice, submerged rocks scraped the boat's hull, nearly puncturing it. Eliza held her breath as they navigated between stone teeth that could tear their small craft to splinters. When they finally emerged beyond the island's shelter, open sea stretched before them. In the distance, lanterns marked the position of Walsh's frigates, still guarding the main harbor entrance, unaware of their escape. 3 hours to Portsville, Blackwood said, raising the small sail. We should arrive just before dawn. As the island receded behind them, Eliza studied Blackwood's profile against the starlit sky. The feared pirate captain was risking everything for her sister, a girl he'd known barely a month. Why are you doing this? She asked, softly. Truly, Blackwood adjusted the sail before answering. Perhaps I've grown tired of watching innocent people die while I survive. Is that all? His gaze remained fixed on the horizon. You and your sister remind me of possibilities I thought long buried. A pause, of the man I was before becoming Captain Blackwood. Dawn revealed Portsville Harbor ahead, a bustling port under British control, naval vessels prominently docked alongside merchant ships. Blackwood had exchanged his distinctive coat for simpler attire, and Hayes wore the clothes of a common sailor rather than a ship's doctor. Remember, Blackwood instructed as they approached the harbor, we are merchant sailors seeking medicine for my daughter's fever. Nothing more. Eliza nodded, heart pounding as they rowed toward the busy docks. Soldiers patrolled the waterfront, redcoats bright in the morning sun. Among them, naval officers in blue surveyed arriving vessels with professional scrutiny. Steady, Blackwood murmured as they neared a checkpoint. Let me do the talking. He produced the forged documents, his demeanor transforming with remarkable completeness from the commanding presence of Captain Blackwood to the worried countenance of a merchant father seeking help for his ailing child. The greatest performance of his life was about to begin. Papers seem in order, Captain Smith, the harbor master said, returning Blackwood's documents. What brings you to Portsville? My daughter has taken ill with marsh fever, Blackwood replied, placing a protective hand on Eliza's shoulder. We seek medicine and perhaps a physician's consultation. The harbor master's expression softened. Dr. Winters on High Street is your best option, though I must warn you, the town is unusually crowded. Admiral Walsh's squadron has officers on shore leave today. Blackwood maintained his composure at Walsh's name. We'll be brief in our business. Thank you for your concern. As they walked through the bustling port town, Blackwood kept Eliza close, Hayes and the 2 crewmen following at a discreet distance. Naval officers and Marines were indeed everywhere, checking papers and scrutinizing strangers. "Something's wrong," Eliza whispered. "There are too many soldiers for normal operations. They're searching for someone," Blackwood agreed grimly. "Let's complete our business quickly." Dr. Winter's apothecary shop stood at the corner of High Street, its windows filled with jars of various remedies. Inside, the sharp scent of herbs and tinctures filled the air. The proprietor, a thin man with spectacles, looked up as they entered. "How may I assist you?" "My daughter suffers from recurring marsh fever," Blackwood explained. "We need cinchona bark tincture, prepared for a child of 8 years. A common affliction in these islands." The doctor nodded sympathetically. "I have a fresh preparation that should serve well." He disappeared into a back room. While they waited, the door opened again. Blackwood tensed as a naval officer entered, young, with lieutenant's insignia gleaming on his uniform. He nodded politely before browsing shelves of remedies. Dr. Winters returned with a small case containing several bottles. "The complete treatment," he explained. "Follow the dosage instructions carefully. The fever should break within 2 days." Blackwood paid quickly, eager to depart. As they turned to leave, the naval lieutenant stepped forward. "Pardon me, sir, but are you recently arrived in port?" "This morning," Blackwood replied cautiously. "My vessel is the Dutch merchant Windhoek." The lieutenant nodded, seemingly satisfied. "My apologies for troubling you. We're conducting routine inquiries of all visitors." They had nearly reached the door when another officer appeared in the doorway. Older, with commander's insignia and a face Blackwood instantly recognized, despite 15 years. Henderson, Walsh's loyal second-in-command during their naval days. Time slowed as their eyes met. Recognition dawned on Henderson's face. "You there, Holt," he shouted, reaching for his pistol. "Run!" Blackwood pushed Eliza toward Hayes, who caught her arm and pulled her through the door. The younger lieutenant, confused by the sudden commotion, moved to block their path, but Blackwood's fist connected with his jaw, sending him sprawling. "Pirates!" Henderson bellowed as Blackwood and his men fled. "Stop them!" They ran through crowded streets, soldiers converging from all directions. At Hayes' signal, they split up, the 2 crewmen heading toward the harbor, while Hayes led Eliza down a side alley, medicine case clutched tightly to his chest. Blackwood turned in the opposite direction, drawing pursuit away from the others. His diversion worked. Soldiers and Marines followed him through the twisting streets, while Hayes and Eliza made for the rendezvous point, a small dock on the harbor's eastern edge, where their longboat waited. Blackwood ducked into abandoned warehouses, doubled back through narrow passages, using every trick he knew to lose his pursuers. But Henderson had organized the search well. Each escape route brought him face to face with more soldiers. Finally, cornered in a dead-end alley, Blackwood prepared to fight his way free. As Marines closed in with muskets raised, a commanding voice cut through the commotion. "Stand down. I want him alive." The soldiers parted to reveal Commander James Walsh, resplendent in his uniform, a gold pocket watch gleaming in his hand. 15 years had added silver to his temples, but hadn't diminished his imposing presence. "Edward Blackwood," Walsh said, studying him with cold satisfaction. "Or do you prefer Captain these days?" "James," Blackwood acknowledged, equally cold. "Still doing others' dirty work, I see." Walsh's expression hardened. "Secure him," he ordered the Marines, carefully. "This man is responsible for the deaths of hundreds of His Majesty's sailors." As they shackled his wrists, Blackwood's thoughts were not of his own capture, but of Eliza, Hayes, and the medicine they carried. If they could reach the longboat, if they could return to Quarantine Island, Marie might still survive, even if he did not. "Search the town," Walsh commanded. He wasn't alone. "Find his accomplices." "You won't find them," Blackwood stated, meeting his former friend's gaze. "They're long gone." Walsh studied him with calculating eyes. "Heroic sacrifice, Edward. That doesn't sound like the ruthless pirate I've hunted these 15 years. He stepped closer, voice lowering. "What brought you to risk capture? What was worth such a gamble?" Before Blackwood could answer, A Marine officer approached. "Commander Walsh, sir. We've apprehended a man and a young girl attempting to leave by boat on the eastern shore. The man claims to be a doctor." Walsh's smile was cold as he checked his pocket watch. "Right on time. Bring them here." Blackwood's heart sank as Hayes and Eliza were marched into the alley, soldiers gripping their arms. The medicine case was conspicuously absent. Well, Walsh said, examining Eliza with curiosity. "What have we here? A pirate's daughter, perhaps?" "Leave her out of this," Blackwood warned, straining against his shackles. "She's an innocent child. No one associated with you remains innocent, Edward." Walsh's eyes narrowed. "Take them all to the Relentless. We sail for Port Royal immediately." As they were led away, Eliza's eyes met Blackwood's, fear giving way to grim determination. She gave the slightest of nods toward her pocket, a silent message. She had saved the medicine. Now he needed to ensure she lived to deliver it. The brig of HMS Relentless was cold and damp, illuminated only by weak light filtering through a small grated window. Blackwood sat against the wall, shackles binding his wrists and ankles. Across the narrow space, Hayes tended to Eliza, checking for injuries from the rough handling during their capture. "Did they find it?" Blackwood asked, quietly. Eliza shook her head. "They took the case, but not what was inside." From the hem of her dress, she carefully extracted 2 small vials of medicine she'd hidden during the chaos of their arrest. "Not all of it, but enough for Marie if we can get it to her." "Your sister is the least of your concerns now," came Walsh's voice as the cell door opened. He entered, flanked by 2 Marines with muskets at the ready. "Though I admit I'm curious about this sudden humanitarian streak in the notorious Captain Blackwood." Walsh dismissed the guards, but left the door open, a clear message that escape was pointless. He carried a wooden chair which he placed in the center of the cell before sitting. "You risk capture, torture, and execution for medicine. For a child." Walsh studied Blackwood intently. "The Edward Blackwood I knew died 15 years ago, with Catherine. The man who took his place cares for nothing but vengeance." "People change, James," Blackwood replied, "though clearly not you." Walsh's expression hardened. "I've spent 15 years hunting the man who betrayed the crown, stole a naval vessel, and murdered dozens of officers loyal to king and country. Is that the story you tell yourself?" Blackwood laughed bitterly. "That I was the betrayer. I have the evidence, the witnesses, the testimony. You have fabrications." Blackwood surged against his chains. "You and your conspirators murdered Catherine when she discovered your corruption. You destroyed my career and blamed me for your crimes." Walsh stood abrupt. "I lost my sister to pirate savagery, the same savagery you embraced when you turned your back on civilization. Your sister," Blackwood said quietly, "died bringing me proof of your involvement in the slave trade, proof that you and Governor Hastings were taking bribes to allow illegal slave ships through the blockade." Eliza watched this exchange with growing understanding. The personal vendetta between these men ran far deeper than pirate versus naval officer. "You're a liar and a murderer," Walsh hissed, "and tomorrow at dawn you'll hang from the yardarm as the traitor you are." After Walsh stormed out, Hayes moved closer to Blackwood. The 2 crewmen escaped. "If they reach the Vengeance, Morgan won't risk the ship for 3 prisoners," Blackwood replied grimly, "especially with a dying child aboard." "Then they're truly finished?" Eliza asked, Blackwood's gaze fixed on the small window. "Perhaps." Later that night, as Eliza dozed fitfully against Hayes's shoulder, a soft scraping sound came from the window. Blackwood tensed, watching as the edge of a thin blade worked around the grating. "Someone's there," he whispered. The grating shifted, then lifted away. A face appeared in the opening, dark-skinned, with a scarred cheek partially hidden by a red scarf. "Solomon?" Blackwood whispered in disbelief. "Captain," the man acknowledged with a slight nod. "Been some years. 5, at least. Not since NASA." Blackwood struggled to make sense of this unexpected appearance. "What are you doing aboard a Royal Navy vessel?" "Working as cook's mate," Solomon replied with a grim smile. "Not all slaves freed by pirates return to Africa. Some choose different chains. His eyes moved to Eliza. Word spreads fast. They say Captain Blackwood risked all for a child's medicine. How many others know we're here? Hayes asked. More than the Navy suspects. Solomon glanced over his shoulder. The Relentless carries 20 former slaves working as servants and laborers. Many remember the Vengeance breaking the chains of slave ships. From his pocket, Solomon produced a ring of skeleton keys. These open most cells and shackles aboard. The guard changes at midnight. You'll have perhaps 15 minutes to reach the rowboat secured at the stern ladder. Blackwood took the keys with astonishment. Why risk this for us? Solomon's expression grew solemn. 5 years ago, you freed a slave ship bound for Barbados. My wife and daughter were aboard. We never forgot. He nodded toward Eliza. Now you fight for another child. Some debts must be repaid. After passing detailed instructions about guard rotations and the safest route to the stern, Solomon disappeared into the night. I don't understand, Eliza whispered. You're a pirate. Pirates don't free slaves, they capture ships for gold. Most do, Hayes agreed, watching Blackwood test the keys on his shackles. But Captain Blackwood has always had selective targets. The corruption I discovered before Catherine's death, Blackwood explained quietly, involved illegal slave trading. After I became what they named me, pirate, murderer, traitor, I made certain any slave ship I encountered never reached its destination. You free them? Eliza asked. When possible, he replied, finding the key that opened his restraints. It's poor business, no profit in it, but some prices are worth paying. As midnight approached, they prepared for their escape attempt. Blackwood checked the corridor through the small window in the door. If we're separated, he told Eliza, pressing one vial of medicine into her hand, make for Quarantine Island. Find your sister. What about you? His eyes met hers with unexpected gentleness. I've survived 15 years as the most wanted man in the Caribbean. I'll survive this. He placed a hand on her shoulder, but Marie might not without that medicine. The ship's bell rang midnight. Down the corridor they heard the changing of the guard. Blackwood inserted the key into the cell door lock. Ready? He whispered. Eliza nodded, clutching the precious medicine. Against all odds they had unexpected allies, a chance at freedom, and most importantly hope. The cell door opened silently as Blackwood turned the key. Outside, the narrow corridor stretched into darkness, lit only by a swinging lantern at the far end. They moved cautiously, Blackwood leading, Hayes following with Eliza between them. 3 decks up to reach the main deck, Blackwood whispered. Then aft to the stern ladder. They crept past empty cells, pausing at each intersection to check for guards. Solomon's intelligence proved accurate. The night watch was minimal, most concentrated near the officers' quarters and gun deck. Reaching the ladder to the upper deck, Blackwood froze at the sound of approaching footsteps. He gestured for Hayes and Eliza to press against the wall as a Marine walked past, musket over his shoulder. The man's eyes swept the corridor, but failed to notice them in the shadows. Once clear, they ascended to the next deck. Here the challenge increased, more lanterns, more activity as sailors on night duty moved about their tasks. Blackwood led them through a series of storage rooms to avoid the busier passages. We're close, he murmured, as they reached the final ladder. The main deck, then 20 paces to the stern. As they prepared to emerge into the open air, the ship's bell rang once. Midnight had passed. Their window of opportunity was closing. Blackwood peered out. The deck was eerily quiet, most crew asleep below, only the night watch moving between stations. The distant figure of the helmsman stood at the wheel, his back to them. Now, Blackwood whispered. They emerged, staying low and close to the bulkheads. The night air was cool on their faces, after the stuffy confines below. Stars spread across the sky, offering just enough light to navigate without revealing their presence. They had nearly reached the stern when a shout rang out. Prisoners escaping, to arms. The alarm came from behind. A sailor emerging from below had spotted them. Instantly, the quiet deck erupted into chaos. Marines appeared from the forward hatch, muskets raised. The helmsman abandoned his post, drawing a pistol. Run! Blackwood pushed Eliza forward. The boat is just over the rail. They sprinted across the open deck as whistles shrilled and orders were bellowed. A musket shot cracked past Blackwood's ear as they reached the stern rail. Below, a small rowboat bobbed on the dark water, secured to the ladder as promised. "Down, quickly," Hayes urged, helping Eliza over the rail. She descended the ladder with remarkable agility, Hayes following close behind. Blackwood turned to face the approaching Marines, buying precious seconds for the others. He snatched a belaying pin from the rail, wielding it like a club as the first soldiers reached him. "Surrender, Blackwood," came Walsh's voice as he emerged on deck, hair disheveled from sleep, but pistol steady in his hand. Blackwood swung the makeshift weapon, catching a Marine across the temple, then kicked another in the chest, sending him sprawling into his companions. The momentary advantage gained, he vaulted over the rail onto the ladder. A pistol shot rang out. Blackwood felt searing pain as the ball grazed his shoulder, nearly causing him to lose his grip. Below, Hayes and Eliza had reached the boat and were working to untie it. "Cut the line," Blackwood called, continuing his descent despite the wound. More Marines appeared at the rail above, muskets aimed downward. Blackwood dropped the final distance, landing heavily in the boat, as Hayes slashed the rope with a knife Solomon had provided. The small craft immediately began drifting away from the relentless. "Row!" Quickly, Blackwood seized one oar, while Hayes took the other. Musket balls splashed around them as they pulled desperately at the oars. The distance grew, but not quickly enough to escape accurate fire. "Get down!" Blackwood shouted as another volley erupted from the ship. Eliza crouched in the boat's bottom, clutching the medicine vials to her chest. One ball splintered the gunwale inches from her head. "They're lowering boats," Hayes warned, looking back at the relentless. Indeed, sailors were scrambling to launch pursuit vessels. Blackwood scanned the dark horizon, mind racing through limited options. Then he saw it, a flicker of light in the distance, quickly extinguished. Then another, closer. "There," he pointed with his chin, continuing to row. 2 points off the starboard bow. Hayes squinted into the darkness. "I see nothing." Lanterns, shuttered to show only brief signals. Blackwood allowed himself a grim smile. The Vengeance. As if summoned by his words, the dark silhouette of a ship materialized from the night, sleek, low in the water, and unmistakably not a naval vessel. The pursuing boats from the Relentless faltered as they too spotted the newcomer. "Your crew came after all," Eliza said wonderingly. "Not for me," Blackwood replied, watching as the Vengeance drew closer, gun ports opening along her side. "For the doctor, and for you." Before Eliza could respond, the night exploded as the Vengeance fired a broadside. The shots weren't aimed at the rowboat, but at the Relentless and her pursuing boats. The element of surprise gave the pirate vessel a crucial advantage. "Head for the starboard entry port," Blackwood directed, rowing with renewed urgency despite his wounded shoulder. As they approached the Vengeance, familiar faces appeared at the rail. Morgan, Collins, even Greeley, throwing down ropes to haul them aboard. Eliza went first, carefully passed up to waiting hands, the precious medicine still secure. "Captain," Morgan called down as Blackwood ascended last, blood seeping through his shirt. "Walsh's second frigate approaches from the north." "We must fly." "Status of the ship," Blackwood demanded, gaining the deck. "Ready for battle or flight at your command." Blackwood surveyed the scene. The Relentless was recovering from the surprise attack, gun crews rushing to return fire. In minutes, they would be caught between 2 naval frigates. Marie asked Eliza, who stood nearby with Hayes. "Alive, but weakening," Hayes replied. "The medicine may yet save her." Blackwood nodded. "Decision made. Mr. Morgan, make full sail. We run for Quarantine Island." He turned to the assembled crew. "The Navy believes that passage impassable at night will prove them wrong." As the Vengeance heeled over, gathering speed with the wind, Blackwood caught Eliza's questioning gaze. "You came back for us," she said. "Why?" Morgan answered, before Blackwood could. The captain may be feared, but he's never abandoned his own. He glanced at the crew around them. We haven't always agreed with his decisions, but when word reached us of your capture, the vote was unanimous, Collins added. Even from those who once questioned the girl's presence. Blackwood looked at his crew with new eyes, seeing not just men who feared him, but men who would follow him even against impossible odds. Behind them, the Relentless fired a departing broadside, most shots falling short as the distance grew. Ahead lay dangerous waters and an uncertain future, but they had what they came for: the medicine, each other, and the broken shackles of the past. Dawn broke as the Vengeance approached Quarantine Island, Walsh's frigates in relentless pursuit. Despite their head start, the naval vessels had gained ground through the night, their superior seamanship narrowing the gap hour by hour. In the captain's quarters, Hayes administered the medicine to Marie. Her small face was deathly pale, breath shallow, but she swallowed the tincture with Eliza's gentle coaxing. "How long?" Blackwood asked, watching from the doorway, his wounded shoulder now bandaged. "Hours before we know if it works," Hayes replied. "If her fever breaks by midday, she'll recover." On deck, Morgan awaited with increasingly grim reports. "They're gaining, Captain. Another hour and they'll be in firing range. And the Western Passage? Tide's wrong. We'd run aground trying to enter now." Blackwood studied the approaching frigates through his spyglass. Walsh had positioned his ships perfectly, one to pursue, one to cut off their escape routes. A classic naval pincer movement. "We need more time," Blackwood murmured. "Time we don't have," Morgan responded. "Even if we reach the island, they'll blockade us again. Eventually, supplies will run out." Blackwood knew he was right. This chase could only end one way, unless something changed dramatically. He thought of Marie fighting for her life below deck, of Eliza, who had risked everything for her sister, of his crew who had come back for him against all reason. A decision crystallized in his mind. "Mr. Morgan, prepare to drop anchor in the main harbor. Gun crews at the ready, but no one fires without my direct order." Morgan's confusion was evident. "Captain, I have a plan." Blackwood turned to Collins. "Bring me my formal coat, the logbook, and my compass from my quarters. Then clear my sea chest of personal effects." As the crew carried out his orders, Blackwood withdrew to write several letters. One he sealed with his captain's ring before handing it to Hayes. "If all goes as planned, deliver this to Eliza when she's ready." Hayes studied his captain's face. "What are you planning, Edward?" "Something long overdue." Blackwood gazed toward the island growing larger ahead. "I need you to stay with the girls. Whatever happens, promise me." "You have my word," Hayes replied solemnly, recognizing the gravity in Blackwood's tone. As the Vengeance entered the harbor and dropped anchor, the pursuing frigates slowed their approach, clearly suspicious of the pirates' unexpected surrender. Through his spyglass, Blackwood could see Walsh on the quarterdeck of the Relentless, directing preparations for battle. Blackwood donned his captain's coat, black with silver buttons, the symbol of his authority these 15 years. He placed his logbook and navigational instruments in a small wooden chest, added the compass, then locked it with a key he hung around his neck. "Captain," Morgan reported, "they're signaling, demanding unconditional surrender." "Signal back." Captain Blackwood requests parley with Commander Walsh. Neutral ground on the island shore. The crew watched in stunned silence as Blackwood prepared to leave the ship. As he moved toward the longboat, Eliza emerged from below decks. "You're surrendering?" she asked. Disbelief in her voice. "I'm negotiating," Blackwood corrected. "How is Marie? Her fever seems less." "Hayes thinks the medicine is working." She studied his formal attire, the wooden chest under his arm. "You're not coming back, are you?" Blackwood smiled sadly. "You see too much, as always." "Then I'm going with you." "No." His tone left no room for argument. "Your place is with your sister. And what about you? After everything, you're just giving yourself up." "Sometimes, Eliza, the only way to win is to change the nature of the battle." He knelt to her level, setting down the chest to place his hands on her shoulders. "I've been fighting the wrong war for 15 years. Perhaps it's time to face the truth, rather than run from it." But Walsh will hang you, perhaps, or perhaps the truth has more power than either Walsh or I have given it credit for." He picked up the chest again. "Do you remember what I told you about Catherine, about the documents she was bringing me?" Eliza nodded. "Proof of corruption in the slave trade. Proof I've carried with me all these years, hidden in my logbooks." He tapped the chest. "Walsh doesn't just want me dead. He needs those documents to remain hidden, which gives me leverage." Understanding dawned on her face. "You're trading yourself for our safety. For more than that," he handed her a folded paper. "These are coordinates to a small island where I've stored certain insurance over the years. Documents, witness testimonies, evidence that could bring down not just Walsh, but governors and admirals throughout the Caribbean. Why tell me this? Because someone needs to continue the fight if I cannot." He looked at her intently. "You have courage, Eliza, more than most grown men I've known. Whatever happens today, remember that your life is your own to shape." The longboat was prepared, 4 crewmen standing ready to row their captain to shore. Blackwood addressed his assembled crew one final time. "You followed me through tempests and battles. Today I ask for your trust once more. Whatever transpires on that shore, your priority is the safety of this ship and those aboard her." He looked at Morgan. "You have my authority to act as captain if I do not return." As Blackwood descended to the waiting boat, he felt a strange lightness. For 15 years revenge had been his compass. Now, preparing to face Walsh not as a pirate but as the naval officer he once was, he found his thoughts not on the past, but on 2 orphaned girls who had somehow rekindled what he thought long extinguished hope. 3 months later, sunlight streamed through tall windows of a merchant's house in Nassau. Marie sat at a small desk, carefully practicing her letters under Hayes' patient guidance. Her full recovery had been deemed miraculous by those unaware of the desperate mission to obtain her medicine. Eliza stood on the balcony overlooking the harbor, watching ships come and go with cargo from across the Caribbean. The Vengeance was long gone, having departed with Morgan as captain after the events at Quarantine Island. No one spoke of what had transpired during Blackwood's parley with Walsh. The crew had watched from a distance as the 2 men conversed on the beach, occasionally raising voices, but never drawing weapons. After an hour, Blackwood had handed over the wooden chest, and Walsh had signaled his ships to stand down. Blackwood had not returned to the Vengeance. Instead, he'd boarded the Relentless with Walsh. The last anyone had seen of the feared pirate captain, he stood tall on the quarterdeck, not in chains as expected, but in conversation with his longtime enemy as the naval frigate sailed away. 2 weeks later, news reached Nassau that Commander Walsh had been recalled to London, amid rumors of corruption. Subsequent reports told of arrests of several colonial governors and naval officers throughout the Caribbean, all connected to illegal slave trading. "Miss Eliza," the housekeeper called from inside, "a gentleman to see you." Eliza turned, expecting Hayes returning from his morning rounds as the newly established town physician. Instead, a tall man in modest merchant attire stood in the doorway, a leather portfolio under one arm. "Good morning," he said with a formal bow. "I represent Martins & Sons, solicitors of London. I'm looking for the guardian of Eliza and Marie Williams." "I am their guardian," Hayes said, joining them from the study. "Dr. William Hayes." The solicitor presented his credentials before opening his portfolio. "I've been instructed to deliver these documents to you and the young ladies." He produced a sealed envelope and several official-looking papers. "They concern an inheritance and matters of guardianship." Eliza's heart quickened as she took the envelope, recognizing the handwriting that had penned her name. Breaking the seal, she read silently, tears gathering in her eyes. "What is it?" Hayes asked gently. "It's from him," she whispered. "He's alive." The letter was brief, but unmistakably in Blackwood's hand, explaining that his evidence against Walsh and the others had secured not only his pardon but restoration of his former name and property. The solicitor cleared his throat. "If I may explain the legal document, they include adoption papers for the Mrs. Williams, transferring guardianship to Mr. Edward Harrington, formerly known as—" "We know who he was," Hayes interrupted with a smile. "Yes, quite. Additionally, there is the deed to this house and an educational trust for both young ladies. The solicitor seemed slightly flustered by the tears now flowing freely down Eliza's cheeks. Mr. Harrington has been appointed to a position with the Royal Anti-Slavery Patrol. His duties require travel, but he wished me to inform you that he intends to return within the month. After the solicitor departed, Eliza shared the letter with Marie, who squealed with delight at the news of Blackwood's survival and imminent return. "Will he really be our father now?" she asked, eyes wide with hope. "According to these papers, he already is," Hayes confirmed, reviewing the adoption documents. Later that evening, Eliza stood again on the balcony, watching the sunset paint the harbor in gold and crimson. From her pocket, she withdrew a small object, Blackwood's mercy coin, which he had pressed into her hand before departing for his meeting with Walsh. "For when the choice is difficult," he had said, "though I suspect you'll rarely need it, you already know how to choose mercy." A ship appeared on the horizon, silhouetted against the setting sun. Not the Vengeance, which had sailed under Morgan's command to legitimate trading ventures, but a smaller vessel with the clean lines of a naval courier. Eliza didn't need the spyglass to know. Something in her heart recognized the ship even at this distance. She closed her fingers around the coin, offering a silent prayer of gratitude to whatever fates had brought a frightened orphan and a haunted pirate together. "Eliza," Marie called from inside. "Hayes says we can go to the docks tomorrow to watch for him." "We won't need to," Eliza replied, smiling as she tucked the coin away. "He's already here." As twilight deepened over Nassau Harbor, the courier ship drew ever closer to shore. On its deck stood a solitary figure, gazing toward the merchant's house on the hill, a man no longer defined by vengeance or regret, but by the future awaiting him there. Edward Blackwood, once the most feared pirate in the Caribbean, now simply Edward Harrington again, had finally found his way home, not to a place, but to the family he had never expected to find. The two orphaned girls who had stolen not treasure from his ship, but something far more valuable, his heart. And in that unexpected gift, he had discovered the greatest prize of all, redemption.